It takes a lot of courage to really step into enabling ourselves to walk our dreams and to live our dreams, really encouraging people to come and share, whether it's a poem or a prayer or a song. It's so important. It's so intrinsic in our nature as humans, but it's so lost in modern society. Everybody's story is so beautiful and so worth to be told. I more and more want to hear more people's stories and to witness more and more people having the courage to share their heart and their soul.
Welcome. For those of you in London or nearby, do join us for our picnic on Hampstead Heath on Saturday, June the 18th. You will meet some wonderful people and we will share stories, songs and food. I have a little surprise plan too, where we'll be in relationship with the beautiful trees of the Heath. This is the kind of thing that you can come to on your own and leave with new friends, or come with a few friends or your family. Meet other people that listen to this podcast that are inspired by the same kind of themes and ask similar questions to the ones that you do. You can visit our events page to find all the information and register. In this conversation, we talk about creating in today's world, and it dawned on me that you might not know that podcasts don't even get the small royalties from the streams and listens. So we don't get funded directly by your listening. There are some funded podcasts that are commissioned by various platforms, but they're generally hosted by celebrities and are full of advertising. I always find that strange when they say we couldn't make this podcast without this advert, as it doesn't cost much, just time. So if somebody is already making money to pay for their lifestyle as a TV presenter or whatever, then they can spend some time a week making a podcast without advertising. We choose not to fill this with adverts, as it would make the space feel jarring and contradictory, given the themes that we explore. Instead, we gift much of our time to creating this and make each episode with love. We are at a stage where we need to invite in more reciprocity, as we don't make content to be consumed, but we bring these conversations into being with care and with love. And the reciprocity part is so important, so that it's not a consumerist activity to listen to this podcast, but it is actually a reciprocal community experience to be exploring these themes together. The easiest way to gift to us is through our membership, where you pay a small amount each month and get access to our community. If you have no money to offer, then write a review, as this really helps the algorithms and new people find these stories. Or you can simply write us a letter and share with us what this podcast or specific episodes mean to you, as this is always really nice for the team to receive and brings in more of that energy of reciprocity. As you may know, our team works either voluntary or on very reduced rates to create something of this quality that does not sit in the dominant culture consumerist space very well. We do this with you and for you, and deeply appreciate hearing from you and your presence in our community. My guest is Abi Poem. Born and raised on the Isle of Man, a beautiful blustery island in the middle of the Irish Sea, Abi was blessed by a childhood filled with old folklore, myths and fairy tales. She developed a love early on for all things mystical, wild and untamed. 8 years ago, she left London, leaving behind a career in human rights to explore the world, study yoga and write poetry. Little did she know at that time that yoga and music would completely transform her life. Abi's music is inspired by the colours and spirits of India, its culture of prayer and connection to source. Together with this, the intangible and inexplicable power of native sacred ceremonies paved a way for her to find her voice. Her music carries the essence of deep transformation and brings forward a sense of hope when one transcends fear of change. Abi lives in the hills of northern Ibiza, off-grid, fueled by the sun, the rain and the stars. She has recently released her debut album, Change Will Come, a collection of songs which tell stories of her inspiration and personal realizations since deciding to follow her heart and wildest dreams. She is also the co-founder and co-leader of Perception, a creative yoga hub in the village of San Juan, Ibiza. Her days are spent teaching a lot of yoga, facilitating kirtans and singing circles, writing a book called Conversations with Heart, and spending a lot of time doing DIY and working in her garden. She is an Ashtanga yoga practitioner, and not a day goes by that she does not pick up her guitar. In this conversation, entitled Melodies of Transformation, we explore the themes of off-grid living, creativity, and songwriting, where we speak to the question, how can we follow our creative dreams and build sustainable livelihoods? The song you will hear at the start is Change Will Come, and at the end, Remove the Obstacles. I hope that you enjoy this conversation and that it inspires your creative spark to flow through you into this world. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration. The spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams. And we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible.
Release the creative potential of life. Transform, see the earth and the sky are joined. Change will come. Truth is one. It's the start of the end of the illusion. Believe in the infinite sight of light. Be free from the tangible reins in life. Change will come. Truth is one. It's the start of the end of the illusion. Illuminate in grace. It's the start of change. The start of change. The start of change. Watch and wait for fate. embrace this healing flow. You gotta be brave, be brave. Be brave, go on, you gotta be brave. Be brave. You gotta be brave, be brave. Be brave, go on, you gotta be brave. Be brave. You won't see through same eyes again. You won't see through same eyes again. You won't see through same eyes again. Change will come. Truth is one, it's the start of the end. The illusion, yes. Change will come. Truth is one, it's the start of the end. The illusion, yes. Change will come. Truth is one, it's the start of the end. The illusion, yes. Change will come. Truth is one, it's the start of the end. The illusion.
Abby, it is a great pleasure to welcome you here to All That We Are. Thank you for coming to share your story here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really, really happy to be here.
My first question is, what are the futures of your wildest dreams that can be part of your story and your unfolding, and then also perhaps a wider vision for the collective?
It's a really good question at this point in my life, because if you'd have asked that question to me a couple of years ago, my dreams were where I have just arrived. So creatively, my dreams were to release a debut album, which I've just done last week. 5 years ago, my dream was to live off grid, and that's how I live my life now in Ibiza off grid. So they're my personal dreams, which I continue to unfold. From a wider point of view, I think, especially in this moment in the world where so many people are witnessing change around them, that people can really have the courage and the determination that's required in order to really follow their really deep heart calling, and in that have a more conscious footprint on the world, maybe make choices that aren't as convenient but that have less impact. And that's certainly how I try to live my life.
The story of your home is quite an extraordinary one, and I have had the pleasure of spending time on this special mountain with you and seeing how hands-on you are with it. That's really inspired me, because I think I came a few years ago and then saw it, and then came and stayed a year, like last summer, and it was like, wow, the transformation. You've not been delegating, like you've built your toilet and all kinds of aspects of it. Can you share a bit about where you got the vision to live off grid and how you made it happen and how you taught yourself all these things? Because you didn't grow up knowing how to do these things, and you weren't trained in these things.
I did grow up a little bit, very much so around building. My parents were always, where they built the house that I grew up in, and my dad always had projects on the side of property developing, and there's pictures of me with knickers on my head pushing a wheelbarrow when I'm 2 years old. You know, I was pretty rugged and barefoot and loved to be hands-on, and as did both my sisters as well. So it's definitely in our blood, this creative energy of creating space. But the off-grid side of it, and this crazy dream which became my crazy reality, started to be planted when I left London at the beginning of 2014. And at the time I was living in London, I was working for a human rights NGO, and incredible things that this NGO was doing. But there was something in me that was really lost, and something was not completely fulfilled. So I left and I began to travel. At some point during those years on the road, I found myself in Nicaragua, in Central America. And I went there with the intention of learning about permaculture and natural house building. And I lived in a community there for 6 months, living off grid. At the same time, I was learning about yoga and meditation, a lot about permaculture. And it just blew me away how you can live so self-sufficiently and with such creative and inspiring methods that are actually ancient old methodologies that have got so lost in our modern world. And so I became inspired to live that way. Admittedly, I'm not living in the tropics, in the jungle, so there are differences. But then when I moved to Ibiza, I was determined to find the plot that I could make this happen. So I was living in a valley just below where I am now, and I was really lucky. I asked a neighbor who I used to walk my dog, and I used to meet this lovely man. He pointed me in the direction of this casita, which I now live in, and it was abandoned. It was an abandoned casita. And so I drove straight up there that evening, and I got into the garden and I saw this desk overlooking the mountains and the sea beyond. And I just knew immediately that that was going to be where I lived. Alas, I didn't know who the owners were. It was then a 1.5 year long process of finding out who the owners were and how I could live in this abandoned house. And a lot of my friends who were in on the secret, it was high secret in the time, because finding places like this in Ibiza are hard to find. I eventually managed to make the situation available for me to move in to this house. And it was completely derelict. There were no floors. There was full of stuff and rubbish everywhere and rats everywhere. And it was disgusting. How did I make it happen? I just did it. I saved up and bought myself a drill. And then I think I probably called my dad and asked him what I put in the end of the drill. And I just started to do things. I didn't do it all on my own, Amisha. I have had help along the way.
Yeah, but I've seen you stacking huge pieces of wood on the back of a car and driving them up the mountain.
Totally. And I visualize a lot. And I think this is a really important point when trying to manifest or fulfill your dreams. You can have the vision, but you have to action your vision. So, but I do spend a lot of time when I have a project walking around, looking in the garden. That's what I want to do next. This is what's going to happen next. And then it's the action to make it happen. Yeah. And somehow I'm very lucky and I always make it happen.
You mentioned permaculture and how that was part of the inspiration. Can you share a little bit about some of the principles of permaculture that have really inspired you, that you've wanted to live more in your life?
The first that springs to mind is in permaculture, when there's a problem with the land or in an environment, the attention of the problem is diverted to be a solution in order to create something better. And I really like that. There's always this spiral effect. So whatever comes down can also come back up, and everything is cyclical. The other thing that really inspired me about permaculture, and I admit it's not something I practice at home. I don't grow my own vegetables, but I buy from friends here in Ibiza who grow their own. And the reason I don't is because I don't have a well. So I live off rainwater. And so it's just a practical decision here when we don't have much rain in the summer. I would much prefer to support another local project of people really doing it well. But I think it's just so incredible when you actually really put your attention into where your vegetables are coming from. So this can apply to everyone. In England, I'm from the Isle of Man originally. The first place I go when I go back to the Isle of Man is to the local market and speak to the farmers and understand what's growing, what's in season, and starting to see how the seasons bring different colours and these things that maybe we don't notice when everything's just lined up in a supermarket. And also from the building perspective of permaculture is how you can use literally cow dung, earth, straw, and gravel and sand in order to build structures. There was another thing that really inspired me when I was living in this community. We were a plastic-free community. Of course, people are bringing in plastic bottles sometimes or sun creams or these things that we can't avoid the plastic. But the solution to this plastic was that a volunteer had to cut up all the plastic waste, whenever it was, and put it into another plastic bottle. And then those plastic bottles would be used as foundations for future buildings. So there was really zero waste. It was really, really wonderful to see how people can live in this way. And all it takes is a little bit more thought.
How have you managed to live in that way in Ibiza, which is known as a place of quite a lot of decadence and hedonism, and how have you managed to kind of create this off the grid, more simple life within that?
Well, I had no choice because there was no power for a start. I got a solar system fitted. It's a second-hand solar system as well. So I often try to buy things second-hand and recycle as much as possible. And when I was having the solar system fitted, I was really, really excited to learn about solar, and then all of a sudden these words like inverters and generators and things start to make a little bit more sense. What I find incredible is once you live off a solar system, you start to understand and notice the sun so much more because you rely on it, So in those months where we're getting less sun, then sometimes before I had a generator, which now I have, but for a few years I didn't. If there was no sun for 5 days, I had no power for 5 days. And then if you have no power, you can't turn on the pump to wash your teeth. It's a knock-on effect. So you become much more sensitive to your surroundings. Yeah, I'm also very lucky where I have a tank that collects rainwater. You see how much rain, how long does 10,000 litres of water actually last you? It's fascinating. Things that you would never, ever know if you're just turning on a tap and receiving it from a main system.
Your space, at times it's a bit of a community hub, but I know there's also been some long winters where you've been there by yourself. How has that process been of adjusting to living on a mountain by yourself in different seasons and sometimes without power? It's something that a lot of people would feel quite fearful to do, especially if they're used to living in a busy city.
Yeah, sometimes my mum would call me and say in the middle of the winter, "Are you not scared?" And I would reply, "Scared of what? The trees?" And I really feel like that. I really am not scared of nature. I love to be up there alone. And it might be perceived as my most empowered things that I'm not scared to be alone up there. But at the same time, it's also one of my greatest curses because I could stay up there forever and not come down. So I really try and bring some balance into my life, especially more so these days. When one is alone and they're content, there isn't loneliness. So then when you're alone in nature, there's actually a real fullness. Having that space, which is one of the reasons why I always ask my friends to leave at the end of the summer after there's been a full house and bell tents and all sorts who've been there and sheds in the summertime, is that I really need the winters to create and to write songs and to be in that space. Otherwise, I sit and drink tea and don't get anything done.
This dream that you had to make music, can you share a bit about how that came about for you and what that process has been like?
Yeah, it's not something that I ever thought that I would be doing. That's one thing that I think is a really important message to everyone, is that to never be stuck into the box that you've put yourself in or that your parents have put yourself in, and to really have the courage to spread your wings in whatever direction you feel in that moment to travel. So for me, I was living in London, like I mentioned earlier, and started to go to yoga classes. And then that led me to start to find myself in singing circles, singing mantras, singing different tribal songs from around the world. And it really changed my life. I remember the first time I started to hum mantras on the tube, and I caught myself doing it, and I was sort of awkward and like, oh, and I sunk into that space and I realized how happy it made me. And then over the years of traveling, I started to sing a little bit, and then I decided I wanted to learn the guitar. It came from nowhere. And then once I picked up the guitar, there was nothing holding me back. I spent hours and hours and hours teaching myself. And I was a poet always. From 8 years old, I was writing poetry and wrapping them in strings and gifting them to my family. And they're very dramatic poems. I found a box of them recently. They made me laugh a lot. With melodies, people listen, I hope, more than poems. And it brings people so much joy to sing together. And that's one of my greatest intentions too, is that my songs really encourage people to sing and to dance and to celebrate music and to be in joy.
I want to give a little shout out to our friends George and Moshi for the singing circles, because so many people have gone through those circles and it's really been such a source of joy and upliftment and community, and sparked so many people on their creative path with their own music. So thank you, George Barker and Moshi Halperin, for what you birthed with that. And I remember, George has said, they just thought, well, it'd be nice to sing together sometimes. We'll just do that and then we'll invite a few people, and had no idea that it would become something that people just really wanted to go to. For me, whenever I go to those circles, which don't happen that often anymore, especially, well, in the last couple of years, they've not been happening. But whenever I do go to them, it just feels like this really beautiful space of community, and that sharing all together, also getting to honor all of these different traditions that we've had the privilege in this kind of extended community to learn about, and to learn from some incredible teachers and about their lineages. And it's all shared with such intention and joy.
Definitely. And the beautiful thing is that all these different traditions from around the world, at the end, they all have the same message, which is an open heart, to be kind and to be in joy. And yeah, I'm so grateful for those times. And then when I moved to Ibiza, there was a wonderful man who also deserves a shout out while we're on that, called Thomas. And Thomas Keller passed away very sadly about 4 years ago. Actually, in his house is where I've now recorded my album, so it's a really full circle for me. But he spent his life putting together songbooks, and it was actually where Moshi started to sing, and George, I think. So it's a really beautiful community of people around the world, and it extends to all corners of the world. And it's a practice of, whether you call it sacred singing or singing circles, or of course in the Bhakti world, kirtans. But it's a togetherness. I'm so grateful for that. And it really gave me the courage to do something that I would never even have dared to dream of. And now that's the way I live my life. So it feels very satisfying.
When you went on a really big adventure, you wrote a poetry book and you shared some of your journey. Yeah, I'm just wondering, where you have found the courage to share your creative voice. A lot of people write poetry, but not everyone goes to that extra step of getting it printed and sharing it with people.
It's just something I've always enjoyed to do, is to share stories. And yeah, I guess I just have a bit of a loud mouth. It's just who I am. And actually, I look at you now and I remember when I shared that poem. It's a 6,000 word poem. It never stops. A really long one, half an hour long. And I shared it in your studio in London, I remember, years ago. And this is probably one of the first places. I'd come back from India.
Yeah, when I had 108 London, and we used to do these really beautiful collaborative events. And actually, George and Moshi did a singing circle at that same weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And I was nervous in those days to share, but I felt like it was just something I was meant to do. And maybe I was on my way to finding myself to become a musician and to share. Yeah. And in fact, people here the other day, because that book it's called Opening, is in the Loo here in the Shala. And so people read it and they come out and then oh, wow, you wrote that book and will you share it again? And I said recently, maybe I will, Now it feels like I wrote it 7 or 8 years ago. It feels I'm so different from the person I was then, but that's all part of the beauty of evolution and change.
You mentioned the Shala, and so right now you're sitting in a space called Perception. Can you share a little bit more about the vision of that space?
Yes, so Perception was born the beginning of this year. It's in a little village in San Juan, which is close to where I live in Ibiza. So San Juan is a tiny, tiny village. And what I really felt was missing in Ibiza was a yoga shala, a space dedicated completely to yoga. There are a lot of spaces offering many, many different things, but there's no space where locals and also tourists can just rely that there's a class every morning, every evening, and come to. So this is the beginning of that journey. I'm doing it also with Bo Lotto, who is a neuroscientist and studies perception. So hence the name. We've got a project which is starting where we will measure people's brainwaves, and his main study for many, many years has been perception. It's the perception of one's behavior, but also the perception of one's mind, the perception of one's thoughts, and the perception of uncertainty is something that he's very interested in. So what we plan to do here in the Shala is to also expand beyond yoga and spirituality into neuroscience and try to weave these two together in a dance that I don't really know exactly where it will go yet, because it's the beginning. With these EEG machines, you can measure the brain waves. So even, for example, when one is meditating or when one is practicing yoga, you can see the state of the brain before compared to the state of the brain afterwards, or in a shavasana, or when one's listening to music or mantra. I think there's also some apps where the perception of light, how light affects our brain waves, what happens in the brain, also with fear, with uncertainty, what can make us feel more unstable in the mind, what can make us feel more relaxed and content in the mind. The reaction of the mind spreads throughout the body.
And is part of the collaboration so that in a way we get a little bit of proof and data around what all of these beautiful practices actually do and what they enhance and open?
Totally. And how fascinating, no? And to be able to also, for local people who are here consistently, can maybe come on a program over a period of time where they really can see the difference on paper, in stats. Some people really like that. I go more on feeling personally.
Yeah, but we can all be data geeks sometimes.
Totally. It's allowed.
It's nice to know sometimes that what you're doing is working.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also important. It's really important to know that there is an impact, and also how you can then evolve your behavior patterns in order to show that impact. It's very easy for us, all of us, to go to a yoga class or to study permaculture or to go on another course. But it's only when we start to actually change our behavior patterns that there's actually real quantified evidence of change. And that's where it's really exciting to me in the wider picture, is how everyone has the ability to change and evolve. And this is one of our greatest fears, is change. But actually, it's where so much beauty lies when one has the courage to step into that change. My album's actually called Change Will Come, and that was one of my biggest inspirations. And one of the things that blew me away most of all when I was changing my life was how I embraced change and I welcomed change. And before, I'd been so scared of it.
When you were talking about like the data, it made me think of all of those rabbit holes that you can fall down in the spiritual path. And you and I know from our journeys and from being in spiritual communities that, well, there's a lot of things that you could be doing, or that sometimes you feel like you should be doing. And in an ideal world, you can go off your intuition and you can really feel like what is right for you and what's really helping and supporting you in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve at that particular time. And you know, the path of the yogi is to live your true self, but there's also different versions of that depending on what other things are happening in your life and whatever else is being asked of you. I feel like sometimes on the spiritual path we can get caught up in ideas, and also other people can try and influence like what they think is right or what you should be doing. There's quite a lot of that patriarchal energy that's kind of come through the lineages. What feels really exciting about measuring the data in the way that you are is it gives people another tool to actually trust their intuition even more, because they can see, oh, this is really working for me, or like that is actually not working for me in the way that I thought it might, even though it's really powerful for someone else. And there's like a kind of fine tuning of actually being able to see as well as feel, because I'm also a feeler like you, but I feel like not everyone understands like how to work with intuition, and that's not been something that we've been taught. So it feels really exciting to bring the science together with these practices so that it all becomes more empowering.
One thing that came to my mind when you were speaking there is that these rabbit holes we can go down on the spiritual path, and things can become very exciting, and you can have huge shifts in your body and your mind and your perception. But actually what we're really trying to cultivate on this path is balance. We sometimes have to go to these extremes to come back to a state of balance. And I think that if I could go through the last 10 years of my life again, I would be told that at the beginning, because I went off on so many extremes. And then what can also tend to happen in those extremes is that you become very self-absorbed into your own path, and things become distorted outside that. So what I would really like to bring here is to students in the space is also people committing to a more balanced longevity in their practice, in their daily life, rather than rushing off to all corners of the world. And yeah, I mean, I love that, and I wouldn't deny anyone that opportunity. It's also incredibly transformative, but just trying to cultivate that balance. And I think by being able to see over a period of time what's actually happening in your brain when you do practice these things could really help one to more quickly attain that sense of balance.
Those peak experiences, or those really deeply mystical experiences, can also be quite challenging to integrate if we don't also have an attention on balance and being quite clear on what else is important in life that we need to show up for, so that we don't get so lost in those big experiences, and that we're actually able to share the benefit from those experiences with the people in our lives, with our community, with our wider humanity and beyond, which is essentially the purpose of coming into that more open space.
The other thing that comes to my mind in what you're saying there is that what goes up has to come down. And so again, it's just finding this space of just having peace rather than grasping for things. And these are one of the main teachings as well of yoga, as of course you know, is this sense of non-grasping. And in all of these opportunities that can fly our way, as spirituality becomes more and more mainstream and available, there's actually a tendency to really grasp for things and to want things. The message that I would love to portray to everyone is, if you can find somewhere local that you can experience these things on a more regular basis and just go for that longevity over extreme experience, that's definitely where the healing is, and that's where the true magic is, because that's where you find the peace. At the same time, of course, having these opportunities, and of course with COVID, the world has changed so much in the last few years, and I can't deny one of my greatest future dreams is to be on a plane back to India this winter to go to my teacher. I think maybe also what I hope about COVID, and I'm sure you agree, is that it's just made us all just calm and appreciate what we have around us. There's so much available around us. So again, it can go back to that permaculture, this way of being where you're not trying to just always find things that are far away because far away feels good or feels exciting or extraordinary, but actually that the extraordinary can be just straight in front of you. I see that more and more when I revisit England now. I miss England really deeply. I wish I was there right now. But there's no more beautiful place than England, and the rolling hills and the green of the leaves and oak trees and tulips and roses, and it's a beautiful, beautiful land that we forget.
You certainly get all of the elements here in Somerset this week. It's been joyfully sunny. Today I went for a walk in a forest where it was incredibly windy, and then went to the local spring to collect my water, and it started raining on me. So,
4 seasons in one day.
Yeah, exactly. You always get exposure to all the elements, and again, it's perception, isn't it, to find the joy in that, which is a journey.
Walking in the rain.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than a pair of wellies if you put them on with joy.
Yeah. Dancing in the rain.
Dancing in the rain.
We are taking just a short pause here. If you are enjoying this episode, please consider joining our community. For a small contribution, you can be part of our beautiful online world, where we deepen the conversation and offer spaces of learning and practice. As a member, you are a patron supporting the making of this show, and you receive a number of benefits, such as special member-only events and discounts on all our courses, retreats, and in-person experiences. You will have membership to our app and connect with inspiring humans around the world through a social network to discuss the themes of the show away from the eyes of advertisers and the manipulation of big tech. Our membership is what makes us able to stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need, and it is the very heart of all that we are. Head to www.allthatweare.org/support to find out more. Congratulations on your album.
Thank you.
I have been listening. I painted a room just the day that it came out or the day after it came out. So I listened to it a few times whilst I painted my room. And it was really beautiful to hear, especially because I've heard these songs. I've heard you play them and sing them by yourself with a guitar. And then to hear these really beautifully produced versions. I was on the island around the time that you were finishing recording in the studio. So to kind of get to witness a bit of that energy as well. Yeah, I'd love for you to share a bit more about that whole process. I'm imagining you in the winter up your mountain with no power, learning how to play your guitar in candlelight as the beginnings of this.
It was a bit like that. And actually, the first winter when I really committed to really learning to play, I'd been traveling in India and had come back and I decided I'm going to move to Ibiza. And I don't know why, because you would think I would know, but I could not keep a fire lit. I just couldn't do it. And I used to pray to keep the wood burner lit. And of course, I just didn't understand the vents and I was used to an open fire and they're just a different thing. So that was the first thing I remember about trying to stay warm in order to be able to play the guitar at 2 a.m. on my own up on a mountain. Yeah, everything quickly evolved. I started to share. I was very nervous to begin with to share. And then a few years later, I was known on the island as someone who would share music. And then people would say, when are you going to record? Or friends or people who would come on retreat with me here would, when can we have an album? So I did a crowdfunder 2 years ago and I raised the money to make this album. So I'm very grateful to all of you out there who supported that process. Yeah, and then all of a sudden it was in a studio and I'd never been in this environment before. You quickly learn that recording is not just sitting in a studio and singing your song like you would in a circle of friends. You have to put the guitar down and then you put the voice down and then you get all these layers of musicians and it takes hours and days and months and years. And it's a 12-track album. So it was a big first project and that's something I've definitely learned. How do I feel about that? It's an interesting one because I actually had a meeting recently with a manager getting some advice for the future and no one records albums anymore. And I think it's a really, really strong representation of humanity and how everything is so fast and quick. And so people just want to record another single and put it out, and record another single and put it out. But there's something beautiful about making an album. And as a storyteller, I really wanted the album to tell a story. And I really hope that it does that. And it takes you up and down like a windy road. I feel very happy with that decision to have made a full album. I launched this album. It came out to the world onto all music platforms. It's called Change Will Come, as I said before. So please listen in. And in order to celebrate that moment, we did a concert here in Ibiza. And again, it's taking oneself into a situation which is terrifying. First of all, to even try and fill a concert was terrifying. But I was very, very blessed to have an oversold out gig, which blew me away. And to play with a band that transforms everything. Like you say yourself, to hear these songs evolve from just me singing them on my own on the sofa on the beach at a sunset to having flutes and cellos and violins and percussions and pianos and bass guitar and angel harmonies of my friends singing with me. It was like a fairy tale. It really was like a night from my wildest dreams. And I just can't wait to create more spaces like that now. the achievement inspires me to want to create more and more of these experiences. So I feel very satisfied, if I say so myself. I feel like I really achieved something by really believing in something that people never ever thought I would do. And I just did it because I never said no, and I just kept saying yes, and I got there. And it feels really, really wonderful. Whether no one listens or thousands of people listen, I did it because that's what my heart told me that needed to happen.
I love that you share about the feeling of satisfaction. You know, so often there's a cultural thing, especially for British people and especially for women, to just be like, yes, or I didn't really do much. And to really own like that you had a dream and you created something and you put it out there, and it feels amazing because you followed your creative spark, you listened to your guidance, you gave something to the world that was wanting to be given through you.
Yeah, thank you for pointing it out. It does feel really satisfying. And it also feels very nerve-wracking because, of course, I'm doing this independently. So no one's really listening except for my friends and friends of friends. But I trust that will grow if it's meant to. And I trust it will. And I know deep inside it will. It just might take more time. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I mean, I have another album ready to record. That's the next step. And this is such as life, isn't it? You get somewhere and then you have to keep going in order to jump the next hurdle.
Absolutely. I did the same with this podcast, because if you want to do something that really comes from that genuine place of your own creative spark and your intention, it's very hard. Like you said, you go to managers and they tell you, don't do an album. No one does an album. In my case, people said, nobody wants to listen to anything long form and deep and meaningful. And I was like, but I do. And I know people are hungry in their souls for that. So I'm going to say, okay, maybe it doesn't fit like the marketplace, but like it still has a place within our humanity. And then over time, I was like, wow, there's people listening in one country, in 5 countries, in 100 countries, in 200 countries. And then, wow. And then there's a space to share incredible things like what you've created with all of those people, with that community around the world. It's so beautiful to create these communities and to share our creativity and to not listen to those voices of marketing and capitalism and what sells, when we know what sells. What sells is what money is put behind, but what touches people is what comes from people's real creative expression.
And what can our intention be? Because if we all just have the intention in life to sell things, then the world is going to just keep tripping over. It doesn't look like a very beautiful future. But the beautiful future that you're creating for your listeners is to bring all the dots of all these incredible people together who really are following their dreams and doing inspiring things. And that's definitely the kind of people that I would like to listen to and learn from and experience with. 100%. Saying that, you know, the music industry is such an interesting place at the moment because there's no money in music for people from streams. It's such a small amount that comes from streams. I'm actually just debating at the moment whether to print a CD, and I would really just be doing it for fun and because it already feels a bit vintage. But I mean, it's not that long ago that we were buying CDs. And now look, we just all have Spotify, and Spotify doesn't really support the artists so well.
I don't have anywhere to play one now, I just realized.
Well, the good thing about Ibiza is everyone has old cars, so they've all got CD players. Yeah, and it's a fun thing to do. Someone said, why don't you do a vinyl? And I thought, that feels a little bit old. Definitely no one in Ibiza's got one of them in their car. At least with a CD, people might listen.
My friend Ashley Radford has just made a vinyl, and he gave it to me and signed it. It's now like in pride of place, like on a dresser in my room, because I was like, I can't play this, so I might as well use it as decoration and make it a meaningful object.
Yeah, although my 17-year-old brother does have a record player, so they are coming back. So maybe that is the way. Just going back to that thing about following your dreams and with creativity as well, one thing that I really see as well in this world and can getting worse and worse is that creativity isn't necessarily valued. And the value doesn't have to be financial because, like you've pointed out, creative paths aren't necessarily driven by that. But the way you describe putting your friend's vinyl on the shelf in pride of place, that is valuing creativity. And there's so many ways that we can value this creative art, providing space for creatives to share and admiring them and encouraging them. I would have never have got on stage without the support of my friends encouraging me to do so. And that's something I would really like to start here also in Perception, is little open mic nights, really encouraging people to come and share, whether it's a poem or a prayer or a song. It's so important. It's so intrinsic in our nature as humans, but it's so lost in modern society. The first time I was in Africa, wasn't the first time I was in Africa, but it was the first time I was traveling alone as an 18 on my gap year, around this campfire with Africans in Botswana. Beautiful, beautiful people with so much zeal and zest for life and so much connection. And they were singing to us, and then they invited us as the Westerners to sing. And we were also embarrassed and so unable to express. And it was then stepping into more alternative circles that I met these people who are able to express because they've stepped outside of this mainstream norm of being very suppressed in society creatively and expressively. So I'm forever grateful to those people who inspired me to have the courage to express and to tell my story. One of the lyrics on one of my songs, it's called Amazing Strangers, is your stories, they're worth being told to the kind souls of strangers. And the essence behind that is everybody's story is so beautiful and so worth to be told. I more and more want to hear more people's stories and to witness more and more people having the courage to share their heart and their soul.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I do this, because I get so inspired by hearing what people have to share. And there's no one that doesn't have a story. Maybe there are people that haven't had the tools or the family situation, the cultural kind of conditions in which they've felt like they can open that part of themselves. But I love, in facilitating retreats, and I'm sure you experience this too, that people arrive maybe feeling a little bit, nervous, and it's new people. And then as all of the practices that we share, like open up, and then, you start to sing together, and it really does spark people's creativity. And then when you invite people to share a poem or even set a challenge of writing a poem in a couple of hours, and everyone's like, I haven't written a poem since I was like 7, and, it's going to be rubbish. And then often everyone's moved to tears by what comes through. It's just that permission, and then whatever is needed to instill that sense of worth and to open the creative voice and to allow what's there to be shared. And there are so many cultures where coming together and singing is just part of being human. It's not just for artists or performers, it's just for everyone.
Totally. And I really, really hope that becomes more mainstream back in the West. And I've been in so many situations as well on retreats where people are writing poems, and I just want to reiterate that, because so many times I've witnessed people come to tears, and I'm in tears with listening to these beautiful words coming out of these beautiful people. And it is so in us all. And it's actually also something that people ask me a lot. My answer is always that it's there. You just have to have the access to it. It's like getting into a yoga posture. We all have the ability. Okay, some of us don't have the flexibility, but in time, we all have the ability. A lot of the time, it's just access. And how can we access? Well, through the breath. And these things that are also intrinsically connected that then take us into the space that we never thought that we'd be able to be in. Patience, though, is something that's really, really important. And patience is something that necessarily we have in the West. I definitely wasn't the most patient person. I've become much more patient, but it's commitment that nourishes patience and nurtures her.
With your album, Change Will Come, what is the story that you wanted to share? You mentioned, the journey and taking people through the kind of the upbeat and the melancholy and into different places of themselves. What was it that you were hoping to open when you chose these particular songs and this order?
I had so many different orders. And then when people saw the order at the end, who were part of the album, they were like, oh, and they didn't expect it at all. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, it's not changing now. And I actually start with a song called Mystery of Music, which is these very minor tones, and it hopefully tunes people in and finds a quiet space ready for listening. And then the album journeys through, I talk a lot about nature. I talk a lot about stepping inward. Change Will Come, which is a name of a song, but the name of the album. And it's something that I was sharing just the other day. So I was again in India, and I was on a satsang retreat. We were studying and learning the process of self-inquiry and Advaita Vedanta philosophy. And so this, to cut a long story short, there were some lyrics. So they weren't lyrics at the time. They were some notes written in my journal from this retreat. And often when I songwrite, I end up going back to old journals to be inspired and to find exciting moments that might create a good song. And I saw these lyrics that said, truth is one, paths are many, it's the start of the end of the illusion. And that song, Change Will Come, was born from that moment. And actually, I think that was really very crucial to the whole development of the album, was having this start of the end of the illusion, whatever that might be. You can look at that in so many different ways. But for me, it was to recognize the start as an end and the end as a start, and that everything is an illusion. We are just here to journey through those illusions. And how can we best appreciate life is to have the courage, I keep using this word, but I think it's so important, the courage to just follow and be inspired and lead, follow and lead, start and end. And everything kind of wraps around. It's a full circle and it never stops. And I hope that through the album, there are expressions of many different moods as well, many different feelings, many different emotions, and also many different voices. You know, it wasn't just singing alone that was what inspired me, it was singing together. So there are some circle songs, we would call them, in there that are designed for everyone to sing. So one of my most happy thoughts is people in their cars singing along to the Remove the Obstacles, Om Gangana Pataye Namaha. And I know a lot of friends are, because they keep messaging or tagging me, and it really gets you moving and gets that drive in you to remove the obstacles in your life and to have faith. Yeah, I really, really hope that people can be inspired to have faith. We must have faith.
Can you share more for those of our friends that are listening that might not have a relationship with Ganesh, who he is and why he's important for you?
Ganesh is a deity, an Indian deity, and he's the figure of an elephant. So someone once told me that he has big ears as an elephant because he's a very good listener, and a very small mouth because he won't tell. But one of the things perhaps he's best known for is removing the obstacles in one's life. In the order of the album, there's a song which comes and explains that everything is alive and everything is conscious and everything is dynamic, connected and responsive. And what I learned more and more as I was exploring these spiritual realms, and I use that word lightly but also not lightly, is that we are so connected, and there is so many intrinsic qualities within us all that are so similar, yet we're so different. And in the realization of everything being connected and alive, and every tree and every bush and every insect and everything is a life, it makes us become smaller and smaller. And then we learn humility. And as we become more humble, yet we become so small, yet these huge obstacles remain in our way. And it's almost as we become smaller and these obstacles grow, but somehow we're able to navigate them more. And for me, on my personal journey, I've often turned to Ganesha to navigate these moments of what do I do? And so the power of chanting a mantra, which you know very well, is having the intention. I often say to people when I'm holding kirtans and singing mantras with small groups or larger groups, is that if you don't feel comfortable chanting Hindu traditions, when one can understand even the simple element of what that deity is representing, then you can start to more quickly understand the intention behind chanting and the power of chanting and the connection that one can gain, not just to themselves, but to the whole circle with that joint intention. And it's a really, really beautiful practice.
Is there another song that you wish to share the story of?
So the one that's springing to mind is actually one I already mentioned earlier, Amazing Strangers. And the reason that I bring this one up again is I was facilitating on a breathwork retreat of a friend of ours again, Rebecca Dennis, in a beautiful place in the UK. I witnessed during that long weekend 24 amazing strangers coming onto this retreat. And some of them have never done any breathwork before. It takes a lot of courage to come into these spaces, especially for the first time, and to breathe and to let past traumas start to come out and to express those traumas and allow tears to come. It was such a profound moment when there was the sharing at the end of the retreat, so that after the 4 days, there was the final sharing, and someone was acknowledging these amazing strangers and how beautiful it was that everyone had had the courage to be able to share their stories in front of these people who had 4 days ago been strangers and now had become people that perhaps they would be connected with for the rest of their lives, if not to become friends, but through this retreat, definitely connected, and such a big part of their healing journeys individually and as a collective. And it kind of butted in the sharing and said, oh, that would be a great song lyric. And I'd been sharing songs during the retreat, and they were like, oh, please write a song. So that song I wrote for those beautiful 24 amazing strangers on that retreat. And I really, really hope they enjoy it. It's wider than that, isn't it? All these small situations that we find ourselves in can tell such bigger pictures. And it's another thing that I've witnessed in myself and also in friends and in students and clients and in my family and my sisters, is we have such a fear sometimes of sharing when it's raw and real. And so we paint things, even people, I don't really paint my face much, but I used to, and of course it's so normal for us to put on these faces and these acts and these ways that make us feel safer. It's like we've got something behind us. In fact, for me now, it's when I'm holding my guitar, I feel safe because it's like nothing can get past me. But actually, when we take down the zip and open up the buttons and really allow our hearts to be heard and seen in their most raw and real form, that it's the most beautiful. And whether it's in a healing space of sharing some deep, deep past trauma or sharing complete and utter joy and happiness, it's when we can really get the essence of it being real that I become most inspired. And I think that everyone becomes most inspired by realness.
There's a lot of talk about authenticity. It's just being who we actually are in that moment. And that's constantly changing and evolving. And we know that we all have such different sides because we know what it is to be a human being. We can have our loud moments and our really confident moments and our really vulnerable moments. And we don't have to force any of them at any time. That's, for me, part of that path of being real. If in one moment you're feeling fear or you're feeling grief or you're feeling ecstatic excitement and joy, then that's okay. That's who you are and where you are in that moment. And it doesn't define your whole being.
And how quickly we as humans can come to judge. So quick we can come to judge, even if we don't mean to. And so I think it's a really, really nice thing to always keep in the back of one's mind is how to empower someone or to honor someone or to just give them space in order to express how they need to express in that moment. And whether that is happiness or anger or rage or joy or all of these emotions, people need to be able to feel safe in their feelings. And that's what these retreats can really, really create in such a powerful way. And I feel so grateful to be part of these retreats.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then when you're allowed to fully be in that emotion that you're in, it just moves. the change comes, the transformation, the energy in motion, and it evolves into something else. And I feel that when we get stuck is when we have to repress something because we don't feel like it's palatable somehow. And then that repression is what chokes a lot of that ability to tell a story, to be in our creativity, and to move into the next space of ourselves or the next space in our lives.
And at the same time, remembering that we're not alone in our feelings. And so I go back to these thoughts now of this song, Amazing Strangers, and those moments, and not just particularly that week, but in many experiences like this. And I'll just share the first lyrics are, my bones, they're shaking, my hands, they're trembling, but my soul knows that it's healing. And by my side are the shaking bones, trembling hands, healing souls of strangers. And the point here is that when we're in these really tough moments of life, whether it's something in the present or revisiting something from the past which is still paining us, it's really important to remember that we're not alone. And these are also really human feelings. And although they can feel so hard sometimes, and you can feel like there's no way out, there is a way out, and everything changes. The only thing that's constant is change. And the only guarantee is that it will change, and that you will feel better, and that you'll come through it, and that you're not alone, because everybody has very, very similar feelings, just different stories. There is space for each story in this world.
And it relates to the possibility within our collective. We know that change is always happening. Sometimes that change takes us in directions that we really feel are not the most beneficial for humanity and the modern human world. And yet, as things are always moving and changing, and there's always possibility within that field, there is always possibility within that field for the change to evolve in a way that is more heart-centered, that is more in harmony with nature, and that is more connected to our creativity and to our desire as human beings to care for each other, to nurture each other, to be in community, rather than, us as capitalist beings, which takes us in very different directions.
And what was springing to mind there is the creativity. To touch on the chakra system, our Svadhisthana, our sexual chakra, is also very creative, but it's Vishuddha, which is this heightened creativity, the throat. And in order to come into this heightened creativity, we need to transcend the heart. And it's being able to really be in the heart that really allows us to start to express our true voice. This space of the neck here in the center and the hollow of the throat is like where we're really able to come into resonance with our complete truth and have the courage to voice our truth. And it's in those moments that change can actually be actioned rather than just dreamed of. And I think that's a really nice thought to be with, is how we can connect these very sensitive and subtle points of our body, the heart and the throat, and allow them to work together in order for us to be in our truth.
Thank you, Abby, for finding your voice and sharing your creativity so generously.
Thank you. I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky to be doing what I love. And I really, really hope, if anything, that this album will really encourage people to follow their dreams. And like I said at the beginning, my greatest inspiration has always been to inspire other people to be inspired, to inspire more people. There's no hierarchy in inspiration. It's just a beautiful circle, of a very intimate circle. That intimacy can be spread globally just by people really valuing and honoring their own creativity and being in it, and not being shy to leave a job that they don't enjoy, or scared to, because they might not have the stability that they would like for a few years. But stability can come as long as you're walking in your truth and you're being true to yourself.
What is the call to action that you would like to leave our friends listening here with? I mean, you just kind of shared an inner one. Yeah, perhaps something on the inner level, and then also something on the outer level as well.
How do you mean on the inner level?
Like something that people can do in terms of, you know, how they relate to themselves in their inner worlds, and then something that's actually more of an action in the world.
I think from the inner world for all of us is to ask questions to yourself and not just to accept your norm to be your future norm, and to always embrace the idea of change. Courage comes up a lot. It's one of my favorite words. It takes a lot of courage enabling ourselves to walk our dreams and to live our dreams. It takes a lot of courage. It's much easier just to stay in what we're familiar with. Familiarity is really, really comfortable, right? Even in an unhealthy relationship, we've probably all been there. This familiar feeling can be comfortable, and we don't know how to change that because we're scared of change. But every change is a new beginning, and keep that in mind.
I love that. If I was to write a song with one of the Hindu deities, it would be with Durga as that representation of courage and our ability to really show up for whatever we have to show up for in our lives, and to be powered by the love that we have and the dedication that we have is so beautiful. And my relationship with Durga has been such a strong part of my path, and I have given that mantra to many people with the love in which I have chanted it with.
Write me the song and I'll sing it.
Well, I mean, we can sing it together.
Yeah, totally. And then from an outer level, how can we all create changes as a global community? I think we just have to be aware of what is behind us. You know, all of these things, some, like we were speaking about earlier, sometimes we can become a little bit selfish and self-absorbed when we go through these processes of deciding that we're going to follow what we want to do. But there's always a wake behind us. Living in community can be a really, really good way of learning that, because there's always someone behind you. So think about how a space is when someone arrives. Think about how much water you just used on the land. Think about everything, every natural resource is not infinite. We have to make actions to protect our beautiful, beautiful world. And it's not going to happen by a few people making those changes. It's going to happen by all of us thinking about what happens when we leave a room, or when we leave a space, or when we leave a country. It's a collective, isn't it? We're not alone. We are all one, and we're all in it together. And hopefully with our newfound freedom post-COVID, lots of fingers crossed, that we can make a change, slow down. We've all slowed down. And this is a huge step to slow down. We really needed to, and we have. And isn't that beautiful that we all have spent more time just being and not rushing around and thinking about what is next to do and what can stimulate me tomorrow, and just being in the present moment.
Thank you, Abby. How would you like people to connect with you and to find your music?
My music is available on all music platforms, Spotify, iTunes, all of them. My name is Abby Poem, like a poem, ABBY. And I also have a website, abbypoem.com. You can also find me on Instagram. You know, I'm early days with all of this marketing scenario, and I'm definitely not a computer whiz. So don't expect anything too grand, but we're growing always. But I'd be very, very happy for follows and for listening to my music. What more can I ask now is that people listen and the ripple effect begins and that people enjoy it. Yeah, that is my greatest dream now, is for people's ears. Musicians, we need ears. No, like an artist needs eyes. We put all of this love and this effort and commitment into creating these projects, and I think that no one ever really understands unless they've been through the process, like so many different professions or creative processes. But yeah, I need ears right now, so super, super grateful for anyone to tune in, to listen, to share with their friends and help me spread the word.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amisha.
Remove the obstacles from your life. Remove the obstacles from your life. Have dignity with grace. Have courage and have pride. Have dignity with grace. Have courage and have pride. Be strong in your song and sing all night long. Be strong in your song and sing all night long. Yes, we sing all night long. We sing all night long. Om Gan Ganapataye Namaha Sharanam Sharanam. Om Gan Ganapataye Namaha Sharanam Sharanam. Om Gan Ganapataye Namaha Sharanam Sharanam Ganesha. Sharanam Ganesha. Sharanam Ganesha. Remove the obstacles from your life. Remove the obstacles from your life. Have dignity with grace. Have courage and have pride. Have dignity with grace. Have courage and have pride. Be strong in your song and sing all night long. Be strong in your song and sing all night long. Yes, we sing all night long. We sing all night long. Om Gan Ganapataye Namaha Sharanam Sharanam. Om Gan Ganapataye Namaha Sharanam Sharanam. Om Gan Ganapataye Namaha Sharanam Sharanam Ganesha. Sharanam Ganesha. Sharanam Ganapataye Namaha, Sharanam, Sharanam, Om Ganapataye Namaha, Sharanam, Sharanam Ganesha, Sharanam Ganesha, Sharanam Ganesha.
Thank you for listening and spending your time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership. For less than a tea or coffee a day, you can access our community conversations and benefits such as our app and member gatherings, as well as being a patron whose support makes this podcast happen. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so others find us. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silo, through borders, timelines, or polarity, that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.